The subject is exactly what the title states, but I'm not entirely sure where to begin. This could take a long-winded detour in the name of context, so let me say this up front. I was abducted by what I presume to be an extraterrestrial intelligence while awake in a normal state of mind. I was with two other people, and we remember it as if it were any other experience. After feeling first compelled to find a place like this and later to tell my own story, I procrastinated as my Reddit username renders me quite identifiable. As I'm not comfortable coming forward with this publicly, I've made a new account. I'll start with my own character, values, and background. I hope to not come across as hostile, as I'm open to everyone else's experiences regardless of their nature, but I must say I was and still am a typical man of science and am extremely skeptical of most so-called paranormal things, including some I've seen mentioned here. I believe strange things can happen and that there are many things we do not currently scientifically understand, but I fully believe the laws of physics govern the universe entirely and that they always will. Even as such a person, I did believe in extraterrestrial life, as I felt that the universe was likely infinite beyond the boundary of the observable universe, and that if the probability of abiogenesis, chemistry spontaneously going biological, is higher than zero, it surely happened countless times in this expanse. Again, it's all about the science and probability for me. I felt compelled to study physics at a young age, and observations like this are inevitable even as a skeptic. Then it happened, and did so indisputably and as directly as possible. Besides physics, my passion was music, and I was a musician. I was with two other musicians in an old house in the country. We'll call them Ethan and Matt. The driveway, or more like a dirt road, was long and led back to Matt's house. A bit closer to the country road that this driveway was off of was another house that his family had previously lived in before his grandfather died, and they subsequently relocated to the house further down, which had originally belonged to the grandfather. We were in the newly vacated house playing our instruments around 2 a.m. and experimenting with some electronic equipment on what was formerly the kitchen counter of this place, which separated the kitchen and living room. To my right was the front door, and to my left was the bathroom. The back door was oddly in the bathroom. While Matt and I stood on opposite sides of the counter tinkering with the equipment, Ethan left to urinate. There was something wrong with the toilet at the time, so he went out the back door from the bathroom to relieve himself in the backyard. It was a very isolated area, and this wasn't abnormal given the unfortunate state of the toilet. When he had gone into the bathroom, he had also closed the bathroom door to the house before exiting through the unusually placed back door. What was likely 5 to 10 minutes later, I heard Ethan opening the door just to the left of me, and for whatever reason I looked to the right into the old living room and into the reflective surface of the black screen of an unplugged television that was still in the room. It was there that I saw it first. I stared harder, almost as if to see that I was wrong, but it was remarkably clear what I was dealing with considering the makeshift mirror I had seen this in. Ethan seemed completely in its control, and he had opened the doors for it. The one into the bathroom and the one into the house. It was looking at Matt, and he too seemed to have become essentially immobilized. I felt terrified of turning around and meeting its eyes, but also knew keeping my back turned didn't make it less real. The strangest thing is that despite how real the thing looked, I would have prior to this moment felt I'd have thought some sort of trickery was going on initially, but instead it was as if I immediately accepted the situation. I was overwhelmed with the suggestion that I should take a seat on the couch. I didn't hear a voice in my head verbally, but it was very evident where the suggestion is probably putting it lightly, originated. I'm normally of a much stronger will. I don't know if their influence is simply this effective, or I'm just rational enough to know there's not much I can do about a being this much more advanced that has its mind made up, but I didn't really resist much. I sat down on the couch without ever facing it directly yet. I noticed that Matt had taken a seat in an adjacent recliner as well. Then Ethan left the being's side and entered the kitchen. He held his eyes closed while walking in circles and enthusiastically bobbed his head about, almost as if we were still making and listening to music. It was like he thought he could just pretend this wasn't happening. I remember thinking, please just sit down. It's going to happen either way. He was also the largest of us, and I was afraid of making the being feel threatened in any way, because I had the sense that it would do whatever it had to so as to feel comfortable. After a while, a dejected expression manifested on Ethan's face, and he opened his eyes, seemed to look directly at the being that I was only watching through the reflection, and finally took a seat beside me. At this point, the being finally began to navigate the room. It touched my neck from behind and pulled on my left ear while bringing its face very close. It didn't hurt, but it was uncomfortable. It seemed to be straightening the ear canal or something, but it stopped and walked around to where I would have to fully see it. It was essentially your gray archetype. The body was slender with arms and fingers disproportionately long. It was taller than what I've since often seen described, but still short, more like a rather short adult female than a toddler. The skin was definitely gray, but with a hint of what I'd call a flesh tone. It had a fairly enormous, hairless head with what were overall small, underdeveloped features if not for the massive, almond-shaped, black eyes. I inexplicably experienced an overwhelming fear that it would place those eyes right next to my face, to my eyes, which somehow in the moment seemed like the worst outcome in the world. Perhaps I was picking up on some sort of warning or command because, unfortunately for me, that's precisely what it did next. I felt raped. The eyes no longer appeared simply black, but as if a void with no surface, and I felt like a germ under a microscope, the loss of any sense of control, power, or privacy. It was in control. It could know anything it wanted. It could do anything it wanted. The next thing I knew, I was standing in the front yard by the porch for no apparent reason. The sun was coming up. I questioned if I was there to urinate or something, and suddenly I effortlessly remembered everything that had happened and immediately vomited. Then I felt intense anger. Here's why. See, I left out a significant detail so far. Remember when I said that I had always been extremely skeptical? Well, that's absolutely right, but it didn't stop me from having a nearly crippling phobia of sorts of their image itself as a child. Even then I felt they did not rationally exist. But damn did they scare me for some reason. I was always terrified of accidentally encountering their image. The first time that I saw a stereotypical gray image that was close enough, I immediately began screaming and hyperventilating. Know what else scared me? Nothing. I wasn't an easily frightened child, yet I lost countless nights of sleep over something I didn't even believe in because the image alone scared me that badly. I researched it more while growing up and concluded that my mind must have needed something, anything to fear, and that it just chose that particular monster at random without much reason. By the time that I was an adult, I was so skeptical that my phobia was long completely defeated. I didn't think about that image at all. I could have walked alone in the woods in the middle of nowhere and felt no fear, because that was just some random thing as a kid that terrified me for no apparent reason, that I never reported seeing or believing in even then. Additionally, now I was old enough to know the narrative surrounding them sounded like BS anyway from a scientific perspective. Even though the image had seemingly inherently frightened me, without the belief in the possibility of real harm, it gradually became meaningless to me. Then this happened. While standing outside at twilight feeling the memories of the night before rushing back, I also had to deal with the fact that it certainly wasn't the first time. I've just learned these things are real, and I just happened to have a crippling phobia of them for a while as a child? No. This had been happening my entire life, and they made little effort to conceal it this time. Although I didn't feel at all without my wits, my rationality also made me question my sanity as a possible solution. Well, that is until I went inside. They, too, remembered exactly as much as I did. Without me saying a word to influence anything, they were already talking about it. They were in shock and wondering why I wasn't in the house, which is where they suddenly came to the same as I had outside. They were in utter panic. I asked them to tell me everything they knew before I said anything of my memory so as to prevent any possible influence. The being had approached Ethan seemingly out of nowhere while he had his pants partially down in the act of urination. That must have been terrifying. It then compelled him to open the doors to the house and lead it in. Matt had seen it immediately and directly as soon as it walked in, whereas I saw the reflection alone at first and didn't dare make eye contact. It's as if on some level I knew about the eyes. I did. They both reported a sensation from the being of frustration and that this was somehow going relatively poorly compared to normal. None of us remember what happened to us after being stared down at close range, but it's as if there wasn't even an attempt to block anything prior to that for whatever reason. It's a completely normal memory like any other, and we all remember the exact same thing.